Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. So today's episode is kind of a special one because we're going to talk about Rogue One, which is, it feels like Christmas. I guess we're close to Christmas, but I mean, it feels kind of special. Just because The Force Awakens was such a cool event in box office sort of history. Obviously, it was the all-time biggest weekend ever for the box office at $248 million, essentially. And I covered it pretty extensively last year when it was happening, just being the nerd that I am. And it really blew people away. There was, I'm going to talk about Rogue One today, and I'm also going to talk about Collateral Beauty, which also comes out tomorrow. And actually, it's playing right now. Like, I'm recording this at about 9 o'clock on a Thursday night. So these movies have technically started playing. There were some early numbers on Deadline online about the Thursday night tickets for Rogue One. I have erased them from my memory so that my projections are actually not soiled by that information. But it's exciting. I mean, it's super exciting. When Force Awakens came out, there was a really interesting debate that happened before it was coming out. Like, is this going to be, is it going to beat the Jurassic World record that was set earlier in the year? Jurassic World opened up very, very surprisingly to $208 million in June of 2015. I don't think anybody really expected it to do that well. I thought it was going to do like maybe like 150, 160. But people really underestimated that film, and they really underestimated The Force Awakens. There were a lot of people that were saying, okay, like definitely 200, 210. I think that's what it's going to do. No one in their right mind, I can't remember what I predicted. And now I'm actually going back and looking and remember my Reddit history. I actually predicted 245 for The Force Awakens. So I'm not going to like toot my own horn, but I was right. And I was right. And I was pretty damn close to what it actually did. And I think I had guessed The Force Awakens would do about, like 58,000 per theater, 59,000 per theater. So it was pretty much right on the money with that. But I was definitely in the minority. A lot of people were saying maybe under 200. A lot of people were saying, oh, it's not going to make Jurassic World. It's been too long since the last ones. The prequels were terrible. There was a lot of reasoning as to why Force Awakens was not going to do a record-breaking all-time opening weekend, but they were wrong. And now we find ourselves in a very similar situation. So Rogue One obviously is not part of the main Star Wars story. It is a side movie. It's not really, I don't really know the time frame. I'm not a huge Star Wars mythology nerd. I just don't know a lot about the canon and like the time frames of these films and how they're supposed to match up. So I don't know if Rogue One, I guess it is a prequel because it's about the building of the Death Star. But it doesn't really feel like prequel. Like, it's not like the Attack of the Clones and all that stuff that came out in the 2000s. So it definitely has its own vibe. It doesn't feel like it is just an extension of The Force Awakens from last year. It definitely feels different. So we're going to talk about that a little bit and try and figure out what it's going to do. And then I'll briefly touch on Collateral Beauty, which is also opening. Not a very exciting film. But for Rogue One, I mean, the best place to start with trying to figure out what we think it's going to do opening weekend is just take a look at the trades and see what they're saying for Rogue One. Now, this has like shifted a lot over the last 6 months because obviously this is the number one box office story of the year. It feels like it has been for like the last 9 months. So the numbers, I think, started out really high after last year. We're like, oh, Rogue One's going to open up absolutely $200 million. No question about it. Now nobody's saying that. So that has changed a lot, even just in the last 7 or 8 months. Currently the projections are for Deadline. They think it's going to do $140 million. Entertainment Weekly thinks it's going to do $150 million. Market Watch, which is obviously the Wall Street website, doing $155 million is their projection. Box Office Pro 155, Hollywood Reporter, they have a range of about 135 to 150. That 135 number seems to come up a lot in terms of internal projections. Like I think that might be the number that Disney will throw out there and be like, oh yeah, we hope it does 135. Like obviously absurdly playing down expectations for the film. I think they wanted to do that because they didn't want people to think that like, oh, we projected to make 180 and it does 170. Like I think they're just really, really lowballing themselves. Just when it does come out, the story on Monday is that wow, like Rogue One did so well, so far beyond the expectations that we had thought. Box Office Mojo, I think, probably has the best guess right now, 165 to 175. And so maybe even before we do that, it might or sort of dive right into Rogue One and think what I think it's going to do. It could be good to just go through the top 5 films all time that have come out ever and sort of give us some perspective about what we're looking at here. And this will actually help us narrow it down into where we think Rogue One's going to end up this weekend. Obviously, the number one movie of all time opening weekend is Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Came out last Christmas or the week before Christmas. It opened at $247 million, basically $248 million on 4,134 screens. A lot of screens, but not the biggest opening ever. That's one thing we're going to notice here. Its per screen average was just under $60,000. Obviously, this blew everybody away. Domestically, it almost did $1 billion. It ended up at $936 million. So obviously we all know about this one. Number 2 is Jurassic World, also last year. Really far behind it though, at $209 million essentially. Opened on more screens than The Force Awakens, 4,274 screens. Its per theater average was just about $10K less than The Force Awakens at $49,000. Jurassic World and Force Awakens, I think both big surprises. They probably shouldn't have been. But they really people were really blown away as they were following the numbers on Friday and Saturday, those opening weekends. And the number 3 spot all time opening weekends is Marvel's The Avengers. This is the one that I remember where the game changed. It felt like, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the previous record holder was before this. I actually gotta go look back. Oh, okay. It was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Was the previous record holder in 2011. It did basically $169 million. And I think nobody thought that the Avengers was going to do anywhere near what it did at $207 million. It had a per theater average of $47,000 per screen, and this was in May of 2012. But it was just that was the game changer, because when you break that was the 200 barrier that we broke. And I don't think anybody thought the Avengers was going to do that. I don't think they even thought it was going to do it. It just really blew people away. The sequel to the Avengers is the number 4 spot, $191 million. I think people were pretty happy with that opening. They were not happy with the quality of the film. And that was in May of last year. It's crazy. In the top 4, we have 3 films from last year: Ultron, Jurassic World, and The Force Awakens. And the number 5 spot, a film from this year, Captain America: Civil War, was at $179 million. Iron Man 3 was in number 6 spot, top 10 opening weekends all time, with $174 million. Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows 2 Part 2 opened at $169 in July of 2011. Another film from this year that actually underperformed, I think most people felt like it underperformed, is a terrible multiplier. Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice came in at $166 million this March. Man, that movie is bad. That movie's been on I bought that VOD and didn't go see it in the theaters. And I thought it was one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. And it's been on TV recently. It just gets worse and worse each time you see it. Hence, it only ended up making $330 million domestically. Number 9 was The Dark Knight Rises with $160 million. That's back in July 2012. And then, of course, the monster of The Dark Knight. And I saw this opening weekend, $158 million in July of 2008. I saw it in Chicago, I remember. So that's basically gives us some context as to the top 10 all time. Where is Rogue One going to fit on this? Is it going to make the top 10 all time? I have no reason to believe that it won't. Like, for all intents and purposes, people are calling this like, it's not really a Star Wars film or whatever. People see it as a Star Wars film, and it's not like where it is in the canon or where it fits in the story arc of the films. What matters is, does the general public associate this film with the Star Wars franchise? And the answer is a resounding yes. So I have no reason to believe that it's going to underperform like some people are saying. Like, these estimates by Deadline, Entertainment Weekly, and Box Office Pro are looking at 140, 150. Mark Watch is 155. I don't see it. And Hollywood Reporter, 135 to 150. What are they talking about? You're going to tell me Rogue One's going to do less than Batman versus Superman? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't know where they're coming from. They're just trying to downplay expectations. I think anything is a possibility for this film. Absolutely anything, including going over $200 million. I don't see why anybody would discount that. So I don't know. I don't know where the analysts are coming from on this issue. I'm pretty bullish on it. I think it's going to do quite well. And if you look at some comparables and we sort of match that to what Rogue One could do, it is opening on 4,157 screens, which is a little bit more than Force Awakens, less than Jurassic World. If we just do like straight comparables, let's say it somehow magically does The Force Awakens 60,000 per theater. Rogue One would come in at 249, actually just north of The Force Awakens. I can say with a lot of confidence that's not going to happen. The Force Awakens was just an event. It was an event. People who hadn't been to the theaters in 10 years went to go see that movie. It really was a celebration of the whole Star Wars world and franchise and history. So I think it was special. I don't think Rogue One's going to even come close to that. If it does similar to Jurassic World, which had a per theater average of about $48,000, $49,000, Rogue One on its 157 screens, or 4,157 screens, if it did the same number as Jurassic World per theater, it would come in at $203 million, 203. I think, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm going to keep going. Captain America Civil War opened this year at 179. It did about $42,000 per theater. If Rogue One managed to do that, it would come in at 176. So I feel like even I can stop right there and be like, wait a second. So a lot of these people out there are saying to me that Civil War, which is the third, I believe, in the Captain America series, kind of felt like Avengers 3, but they didn't call it that. Tony Hawk was in it, or not Tony Hawk, Tony Stark, Iron Man was in it, and a lot of different characters. So it kind of felt like it was an Avengers film. You're going to tell me that opened in May this year, that's going to do better than Rogue One? I mean, maybe. The one thing that The Force Awakens really changed was that there wasn't really a super, super big December opening before that. I'm actually going to look and see what the record was for December before that. But it just, I don't know, it changed the way people think, it changed the way people thought about December releases and putting a blockbuster in that month, just because it never happened before. Before that, it was The Hobbit, which came in at $84 million. So like the record, which was set in 2012 for December before The Force Awakens, was only $84 million, and then it jumped up to 247. So, just because there's a history and a past there, doesn't mean it's going to perpetuate itself over and over again. So I think that Rogue One is definitely going to have a huge opening of the likes of a Civil War, at least. Another one to look at is Ultron, $191 million last year. That did $44,000, almost $45,000 per theater. If Rogue One did something similar, you're talking about $185 million opening weekend. That feels a little bit better. I don't know. People are really bearish on this film on its opening weekend, and I don't know if it's just like haters or there's just like it just feels like there's just like a backlash against it for some reason. The reviews are great. It's got an 85 on Rotten Tomato, and that's after 236 reviews. So that's not going to move that much. It's going to be fresh, obviously, and like not even being close. 85 is a great score for a huge blockbuster like this. And you know, like I don't know. I think it's just like haters want to hate. Is essentially what it comes down to, and like nobody wants to say, hey, it's going to do $200 million. And then, you know, a similar thing or opposite thing happened with Civil War this year. Once we got closer to Civil War, people were losing their minds. And they were like, oh, it's going to do over 200. It's going to do 220. Like, it's going to be outrageous. I know it. And the entire time people were talking about it, I was like, nah, that's going to be like 180 tops. Like, there just wasn't anything about that film that was going to bring out like grandmothers to go see the film. Whereas like Rogue One, I feel like it does have that 4-quadrant feel to it, where Civil War did not. So I think it has a chance to do quite a lot of money here. I'm not going to cheat and look at the deadline numbers that are coming in right now. I'm not going to do it. Let's say it bombs, relatively. Let's say it just doesn't connect with people at all. It only connects with like the nerds who love the whole Star Wars mythology. Let's say it does Dark Knight numbers, comes in at $36,000 per screen. It still does $149 million. This is why these projections by these analysts seem so fucking off. It could like basically fall flat on its face and still make $150 million. Finding Dory numbers, $31,000. Coming at $130 million for Rogue One if it did that similarly. I think, I don't know. I feel like it's going to be in the Jurassic World. I feel like it could break $200 million. I think on the low end, you're looking at like the very low end, you're looking at Dark Knight. That's like a total collapse. The audience just wasn't there. They're not interested in this story. Maybe they don't think it's part of Star Wars. I don't know. That could be a possibility. So, you know, I think on the low end, you're taking 150. On the high end, you know, obviously I don't think it's going to get up to The Force Awakens. I feel like it could do. The weather is terrible, by the way, in a lot of places. It's super cold. And I know in the Midwest, they're going to get slammed with a huge blizzard. I know because my parents live in Wisconsin. They're going to get a foot of snow. That could affect the Midwestern numbers pretty badly. But I'm going to say on the high end, you're probably looking at like a 50K per theater average. And that would, you know, put it just a little bit under Jurassic World. And I say that because Jurassic World was like a reboot, it felt like, and so was The Force Awakens. Now, they technically weren't, but they felt like creatively wise, they were just like a reinvigoration of the brand. And Rogue One doesn't necessarily feel that way. It feels like a continuation of what The Force Awakens did last year. So I think there's going to be a little bit less excitement for it. I'm going to say, I think my final guess is that it'll probably do about $47,000 per screen, which will put it at $195 million. Now, that does seem pretty outrageous compared to these other predictions that are coming in. But I don't fucking care. Like, I feel like this is what I feel like it's going to do. I think it's going to do $195 million. The quality's high. The trailers have been fantastic. People are super hyped about it. I could be wrong, though. I could be really effing wrong. And this thing could just sort of... A flop for Rogue One is going to be anything under, I think, anything under 160. Anything under 170, if I'm really honest. I mean, just compare it to the last film in the series, and you know, it should do more than that. Now, I'm gonna preface that with saying I did peek at the early numbers from Deadline, and apparently Thursday night tickets are about half of what The Force Awakens did. That doesn't scare me that much, just because I feel like Force Awakens was gonna be super front loaded. Just because it was like this special event film, the return of Star Wars, actually quality Star Wars, not the bullshit that Lucas did with the prequels. So that's the one thing to keep in mind. Like I have that in the back of my head now, like, oh shit, this thing could flop and do Dark Knight numbers. But I'm confident. I think people are going to show up over the weekend and it's going to do 195. Okay, so that's obviously the huge opener this weekend. The other opener is Collateral Beauty. And this is turning out to be a real stinker, as they used to say. It's Rotten Tomato score now is 13%. That's with 70 reviews. It looks awful. The moment I saw this trailer, I shorted the movie on the Hollywood Stock Exchange. It looked so just blasé and like the film version of Ambien. Like I would go and I guarantee you, if I went to go see this tomorrow, didn't matter what time of the day, I would fall asleep in like 5 minutes because it looks awful. This is Will Smith. And a lot of other actors in it here. It's from New Line Cinema. It's kind of a shorter film. It's like a short little drama. Edward Norton. Keira Knightley is also in this. I forgot she was in this. So I think this is obviously your counter-programming play, right? Like the biggest film in the world is opening. Let me open something that is quite the opposite. This was also a blacklist script. So that's the list of like, I think the best 100 scripts each year that aren't being produced yet. So I believe Collateral Beauty was on that. So apparently the script is good enough where people are like, oh yeah, this is awesome, someone should produce this, and it actually came to fruition. But it's looking like a real dud right now. Box Office Pro says it'll do about $10 million this weekend. Box Office Mojo says $12.5 million. Entertainment Weekly says $10 million. Hollywood Reporter just sort of like blew off this assignment and didn't even really look at it, but they said low teens. Okay. And then Box Office Guru, which is a cool site that's been running for a while, they said $10 million. So the consensus is about like 10 million. If it can get past the 10 million mark, it'll do within its projections. If it goes into the teens, 13, 14, 15, that's a pretty good performance for this. So it's opening on about 3,028 screens. So, let's do a little comparable rundown here. Obviously, the biggest comparable is Will Smith's sort of like quiet adult drama from last year, Concussion. That had a per theater average of $3,700. So if Collateral Beauty can match that per theater average, you're talking about $11.2 million overall. Another movie that came to mind that seemed really, really like this was 7 Pounds. Also Will Smith. Also kind of like, I don't know, like a really boring adult drama. I saw 7 Pounds in the theater. It was okay. It wasn't terrible. But it's not something, I think I just went because I was bored. It's not a movie you're going to go and see as like an event. So it's like, oh yeah, I got to go see this. And Collateral Beauty seems the same. It just seems like, oh, if like Rogue One's sold out and everywhere, maybe I'll go see this because I'm super bored. 7 Pounds did $14.8 million opening weekend, $5,385 per theater. If somehow Collateral Beauty can do that, you're talking about $16.3 million. That would be a fantastic opening for this film. With the reviews the way they are right now, and just the Rogue One juggernaut, anything in the teens would be really awesome for Collateral Beauty. Despite the fact that the film looks like it sucks, that doesn't really matter when it comes to money and marketing. What was the film last year? Daddy's Home, I think, or something like that. I can't remember what it was. It was the Mark Wahlberg, Will Ferrell film, and I actually got it on cable the other day. It was just wretched film, but did fantastic over the holiday season. So you never know. Also, Sisters was a comparable counter programming to last year's The Force Awakens. It did $13.9 million. Went on to do a lot more. Had a great multiplier. Its opening weekend, it did $4,700 per theater. If Collateral Beauty can get that, you're talking about $14.2 million. That would be a great win for this film. Another one that came to mind, I don't know why, it was like a Christmas release, had some buzz to it, but just didn't connect with audiences a few years ago. Big Eyes opened to $3 million. It was kind of a limited release, but it had a low per theater average, which I think might be more in line with Collateral Beauty, $2,300 per theater. So if Collateral Beauty did that, you're talking about $7 million essentially. So I think that's going to be the low end for this. There's too many stars in it. Big Eyes is kind of an art film. There's too many big stars in this. It looks a little bit too middle of the road to do that poorly. It's going to get like people over 30 and 40 to see it. That's going to be the crux. Probably people over like 50, to be honest with you. What a snooze fest. So I think on the low end, you're talking $7 million. On the high end, just because of the poor quality, I mean, these reviews are vicious. The Village Voice one especially is just one of the best takedowns of a film I've seen in a long time. Just destroys the thing. I'm thinking the most it's probably going to do, let's say per theater. Wow, yeah, I'm thinking like maybe 3,000 per theater. And that would put it at just about $9 million. That seems a little bit more in line to me. I don't like these $10 million predictions. I just feel like they just threw it out there and like they weren't really thinking about it. But $3,000 is a really low per theater average. I'm gonna say Concussion had a $3,700 per theater average. I'm gonna say it does about $3,300 per theater. So if it does, if Collateral Beauty does $3,300 per theater, you're looking at a total for the weekend of just about $10 million. God damn it. You go through all this rigmarole and you criticize all these people and you come up with the exact same number as them. I'm going to agree with the analysts on this one. I'm going to say about a $3,300 per theater average, which is not good. It's poor. I mean, it's really poor. Like, I don't get why you're releasing it on this weekend. I get the counter programming play. It sort of worked for Sisters. Not really, though. That ended up making a lot of money down the line. It would have been better if Sisters had opened like maybe a weekend later, like maybe right around Christmas. I think it could have scored maybe a bigger bump or something, because that movie was going to play through the new year in January. Like, it wasn't going away. Like, why would you? I don't know. Anyway, so I think Collateral Beauty is going to make about $10 million for the weekend, and those are the only two big openers coming out. Now next week, there's a big crop of films coming out. The big one is Passengers. Oh man, Sing comes out. Assassin's Creed comes out. This is like the holiday Christmas play for all the Oscar films. Patriots Day comes out. That's supposed to be pretty good. And there's a whole nother crop of films that comes out on the 23rd, right before Christmas Eve. Why Him? Oh my God, that looks so bad. James Franco and Bryan Cranston. I will say this, a little preview. The reviews right now for Passengers are really, really bad. It's sitting at 30% Rotten Tomatoes. There's only 20 reviews in, but I've read through most of them just because I'm a total freaking obsessive nerd about films. They're bad. They're really bad. And it actually, when I found out one of the major plot points of this film that apparently you learn early on, but I won't spoil it for anybody, I just decided I'm not going to see this film, maybe ever. It just was like really disgusting. And so if you're into it, if you're into J Law and Chris Pratt, they're both cool actors. You might want to check it out. But I would read maybe a review or two. It's not like a huge spoiler. You're going to find it out in the first 30 minutes of the movie. But it made me just not ever want to see it. Any event, that's enough of my whatever rants for now. I'm thinking Rogue One, 195, despite the fact that the other numbers are suggesting different. I'm sticking with it, $195 million. Collateral Beauty, I'm agreeing with every single analyst in the world saying $10 million. Thanks for listening, guys. This is the Wildline Podcast. I've been Dan.